Dodge is expected to return to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2026 and could have a Cup Series program in 2027, and Corey Heim has signed a development contract with 23XI Racing. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint schemes we're taking a look at is Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace's 2025 Mobil 1 schemes that we'll see in select races in 2025. Both these paint schemes look really awesome. I love the red, I like the blue, I like the black number. They look really awesome, look really great. Looking forward to seeing them on the racetrack this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Joey Logano's 2025 Pennzoil scheme that we'll see at Las Vegas in a couple weeks. I really like this paint scheme. I like the yellow. I like the white. The colors look really soft. They look really great. Definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Las Vegas. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Leland Honeyman Jr.'s 2025 DWC scheme that we'll see in 4 races in 2025. I think his scheme's really cool. We got to see his car at Atlanta Motor Speedway in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race. It does look really good, and I love the colors on this car overall, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about New Era Cap. As there was reported by Adam Stern on Friday night that New Era Cap has released a new line called Motorsports in Modern Speed. This will be used on all their caps and all the sports they associate with, especially in NASCAR as well. I gotta say the New Era caps look really cool. They, of course, have announced a partnership with Kyle Larson this year as well. I think the caps look really great. Love the look of them overall. Glad to see we're going to be seeing them in 2025. I think they look really awesome and really great, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ride the Dente. As there was a report by Adam Stern on Saturday evening that Ride the Dente, the video on Chili's YouTube page, has now surpassed 2.5 million views on YouTube. For an ad that we've seen during race day, of course, to promote the Chili's brand, which of course did sponsor Justin Haley, and the drivers of Spire Motorsports during the Daytona 500, I think it's pretty wild to see that a company like Chili's, which has been growing their brand in recent years and coming back into the limelight, I think it's pretty awesome to see that Ride the Dente in that ad, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it, I think it's pretty cool that 2.5 million people, or 2.5 million views have been surfaced on the page. It's pretty cool to see, and glad to see that Chili's, even though I'm not the biggest fan of their food, glad to see 2.5 million people, or 2.5 million views have shown up for the video. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ford. As it was reported by NASCAR Insights, aka Trey Ryden, that Ford had 9 cars inside the top 10 during NASCAR Cup Series qualifying at Atlanta Motor Speedway. This is the first time that Ford has had 9 cars inside the top 10 during qualifying since Atlanta Motor Speedway in November 1993 for the final race of the season. Ford was on it during qualifying. They were extremely strong, extremely quick. The only non-Ford that was inside the top 10, of course, is Kyle Busch, who did win the truck race, which we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. But I think it's pretty wild to see how Ford has just been super fast and super strong at the super speedways. And I think it's really awesome to see that Ford continues their dominance at super speedways on qualifying. You may not like it, but I think it's pretty crazy they continue their dominance on these types of tracks, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Hill. Now, Austin Hill, of course, won a very dominating race at Atlanta Motor Speedway, but he also made history as he's officially now led the most laps in Xfinity Series competition in Xfinity history at super speedways, as he has now surpassed over 700 laps, surpassing Dale Sr. and Dale Jr., and I believe has led over 730 laps in NASCAR Xfinity competition at super speedways. Austin Hill also, I believe, is tied for second all-time on the wins list as super speedways in NASCAR Xfinity Series competition. It's just incredible to see what Austin Hill has been able to do at these types of tracks. He's just amazing at these types of tracks. He qualifies up front. They're always up front. But he just could dominate and move the lines during the Xfinity race, which I thought was pretty awesome and pretty incredible. Congratulations to Austin Hill on having the new number and the new record, especially to have over 700 laps led in super speedway competition and have 8 wins as well. I think that's a pretty awesome and a really great accomplishment overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sebastian Wheldon. As it was reported by Nathan Brown from the Indy Star that Sebastian Wheldon will be driving the pace car at the Grand Prix of St. Pete later this weekend. Sebastian Wheldon, the late son of Dan Wheldon, has been making his way up through the ranks. I believe he's going to be racing almost in the NXT in the next couple of years, and I believe is racing in the third league in the Indy F2000 in 2025 for Andretti, as he does have a development contract for the team. I think this is really awesome to see, though, that he is going to have the chance and opportunity to drive the pace car at the Grand Prix of St. Pete. It probably won't be too long before we do see Sebastian Wheldon racing in IndyCar in the next couple of years, but I think it's really great to see that he will get the opportunity to drive the pace car at the Grand Prix of St. Pete. I really like he's getting that chance and opportunity to do that later this month. Pretty cool to get that chance later this week at the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about NASCAR Racing Network. As there was originally reported by Chris Knight from CashFence.com and confirmed by many reporters in the industry, that every single NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race will be broadcast on a new radio network called NASCAR Racing Network. This is a partnership from Motor Racing Network and Performance Racing Network, a partnership to save money with both of the networks in 2025. They're, of course, going to have a rotating cast of people from PRN are going to do some of the races this year, while some of the people from MRN are going to do the other races in 2025. I think this makes a lot of sense, and I think down the road you are going to see both of the radio companies from PRN and MRN combined in the coming years. That's not been the case ever, but the fact they're starting it off in the Truck Series, I think in the near future to save a lot of people money and save some time as well. I do think down the road that this is going to be something that is going to end up being extremely common and something that will be the thing to watch out for in the coming years in regards to racing broadcasts on radio, among other things as well. So we'll keep an eye on this for sure, but overall I think it's pretty awesome that they're going to be combining. I think you're going to get to see some really good people work on both of the networks, and you might see some other people they haven't seen before get the chance and opportunity to do this where they get to do some broadcasts. I think that's something that's really exciting for the future of radio broadcasting overall. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Atlanta truck race. As there was a report by Trey Ryan, aka NASCAR Insights, that we have now had 16 consecutive Truck Series races with no overtime finish, going back to North Wilkesboro in May of 2024. This is the second longest streak in Truck Series history, since going all the way back, I believe, to the first couple years in Truck Series history, back in like 1997 or 1998. The fact that a few years ago we were talking about how the Truck Series was the craziest series in regards to racing with all the cautions, and now they've been generally the cleanest series in regards to racing etiquette, outside of Connor Jones wrecking people intentionally, I think that's absolutely wild to think about, because you think about the Cup Series and Xfinity Series, and it seems like we're going to overtime on a pretty consistent basis. And we also had a really good finish yesterday as well during the Truck Series race. Kyle Busch beat Stuart Friesen by 17 one-thousandths of a second, which is one of the closest finishes in NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series history. But it's just incredible to see that the Truck Series has improved their racing product, and some of these drivers in the near future as well are probably going to have rides in the upper series. So seeing that this is going on is really fun to look at for sure, and pretty awesome that the Truck Series continues to put in the new numbers and continues to break records, and I hope that record doesn't get broken anytime soon in the not so distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Port City Racecars. As there was reported a couple days ago by some big names in the industry that Port City Racecars has officially been sold to Terry Jones and Rhett Jones Racing. Port City Racecars has had association with Rhett Jones Racing in recent years when it comes to their late model program, and Terry Jones, is one of the owners of the Rhett Jones Racing organization, has bought some of the ownership of that group, and Noah Gragson, from what I understand, also has some pretty big association with this group going into 2025. Rhett Jones Racing in recent years has added Greg Zipadelli in the last couple weeks, and they could also make some NASCAR Xfinity Series starts at some point in 2025. I think this is a really huge deal, especially when it comes to the late model scene, because I think this is a big deal for the late models, and this could lead down the road to Rhett Jones Racing having a development program, maybe giving someone like Cletus McFarland a chance and opportunity to do some late model racing in the future, maybe in the Snowball Derby, and also could give Noah Gragson an opportunity to make more starts in that as well. This is a really huge deal for the team. Pretty awesome to see the Port City Racecars will get to work with Rhett Jones Racing in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cam Waters. Now, I believe it was on Friday evening, but if you watched the Supercars race at Sydney for the opener of the event, the second race is absolutely a classic. The final 15 to 16 laps between Cam Waters and I believe Frankie Muniz were absolutely iconic. Cam Waters is being super aggressive and tried to make a move. And coming to the checker flag of the race, he made a very impressive move to the inside, I believe, of Frankie Muniz, got a run coming down the front straightaway, and got side by side, beating and banging across the checker flag, and Cam Waters would win in an absolute incredible finish. There were a lot of people that were calling for Cam Waters to be penalized, which I certainly did not understand that, because Cam Waters is doing something that you're supposed to do, which is you should be racing. If you don't like that kind of racing, go watch Formula 1 at this point, because I thought that racing that we saw during the Supercar race is some of the best racing we've seen in recent years, because one of the issues that Supercars has had is a racing etiquette, and the racing itself just has not been that great recently. So I really enjoyed the race. It was absolutely a very fun event for Supercars especially, and I think that we hope get to see more of that racing going forward in the future. Are we going to see that? I don't know at this particular moment and point, but I thought the race is very excellent. It was absolutely outstanding, and I really enjoyed the racing that we saw at Sydney this week, and hopefully that racing can continue throughout the rest of the year, but I'm not sure if that will continue, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hy-Vee. As there was reported originally by Bruce Marr from Forbes and also Nathan Brown from the Indy Star, that Hy-Vee is officially no longer the sponsor of the Iowa doubleheader. And it was also confirmed later that Friday evening they are no longer the sponsor for the Milwaukee Mile. One of the Team Penske groups and the Penske Entertainment Group will sponsor the event later this year. This is absolutely huge. We already knew the Hy-Vee would be backing away from Rahal Letterman Lanigan going into 2025. There had been some speculation that they were going to fall them over to Arrow McLaren because of Christian Lundgaard, who's had a real association with the Hy-Vee brand in recent years. It sounded like there was a chance that that could have happened this year, but that will not be happening in 2025. This also confirms that there will not be the big concert events for the races at Iowa. This is really unfortunate news. Hy-Vee, of course, does have a lot more association with NASCAR currently at the moment right now with the IndyCar, well, not the IndyCar, but the Iowa event that will take place in August. But this is a big loss for IndyCar. To not only lose your sponsorship for your races at Iowa, which have been very successful in recent years. I know the racing hasn't been great for IndyCar at Iowa since they reconfigured the track, which are not planning to do that, which I think is really stupid. But I think that losing your title sponsorships for multiple of your events is really unfortunate and disappointing. And I think it does show concern, considering you've got Honda, who's heavily rumored to be leaving IndyCar at the end of this year. I think that or 26, I should say. I think that losing a big sponsor like Hy-Vee is definitely a massive loss for the brand. And I think it's really unfortunate to see this news too, because I certainly think that losing a big brand like Hy-Vee like this is definitely very disappointing. I really hope it does get resolved very soon, because stuff like this shouldn't be happening where you're losing big-time sponsors. It's really concerning for the future of IndyCar right now, because like I said, losing a big sponsor is not a good thing for the sport, and I think that they need to get it figured out quickly, because there could be more stuff they're losing in the future if things are not resolved, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sabrina Carpenter and William Byron. Now, one thing that's been going around on social media from accounts like the Daily Downforce, which of course is a parody account of the Daily Downforce, is there's been a lot of rumors and speculation that Sabrina Carpenter and William Byron maybe in the near future could end up dating. Now, William Byron did confirm, and people asked him at the media center, I believe it was on Saturday morning, has William Byron spoken to Sabrina Carpenter about getting her out to the track? William said no, they have not talked yet currently at the moment, and they're not sure if they're ever going to talk down the road. Many people are wanting a big-time story, right? They are wanting this to happen because obviously we know the power couple of Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. Many people think it'd be pretty wild to see Sabrina Carpenter, who's one of the biggest pop stars in the music industry currently at the moment. It would be wild to see Sabrina Carpenter and William Byron be dating at some point. That would be absolutely a wild story that I don't think anybody would have expected, considering that he is not in a relationship with anybody currently at the moment, including Aaron Blaney. I think it'd be pretty crazy if he went from Aaron and started dating Sabrina Carpenter. Will it happen? Who knows at this point? I would love to see it happen where they get into a relationship. Is it going to happen? I don't know for sure at the moment, but I think it'd be pretty cool if something like that could happen where both got to be in a relationship, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Prime. Now, this past weekend, we saw the first qualifying session for Prime on Amazon. Now, one big thing to note, and reported by Bob Pockets as well, is that Fox is going to produce the qualifying sessions for all their events that they are going to have. So from this past weekend, Atlanta, all the way to their final event, which outside of North Wilkesboro, they are going to be producing all the events on Prime. Now, one big positive I did see from the broadcast, from the qualifying and practice session, is the fact there are no cartoon characters. Thank God we're not seeing any of the cartoon characters. One of my biggest issues, and this is going to be something that is going to come up during the IndyCar race, is the fact that there are cartoon characters. I am not a big fan of the cartoon characters. I've been against them for a very long time, but that's not just a NASCAR issue. That is definitely an issue with Fox. They have the cartoon characters, of course, for all their things with their NFL coverage, and people have also been against the NFL athletes and the NFL players basically getting the cartoon characters. It just is very, very cringy to me, and I think especially with how bad the broadcast was today from Fox, I really think that getting rid of the cartoon characters is the way to go. Eventually, NASCAR Productions is going to take over full control once they do get to their portion of the year, which, of course, will have the 5 races on Prime. Dale Jr., Adam Alexander, Civitar are going to be in the booth. Dale Jr., of course, will not have any sort of involvement with the broadcast until we get up to the start of their portion, which is a couple months away. Thank God we're not too far away from that at this point. But to me, I really think that in regards to this, I think it's good to see that they actually care a little bit. I thought the production quality was not too bad. There's still some sloppiness for sure. There's no denying that, but I think that's something that will get figured out, and I think it definitely will get sorted out in the not-so-distant future. The big positive, though, like I said, is the fact there are no cartoon characters that I saw, which I think is a good thing overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bayley Currey. Now, Bayley Currey, of course, competed in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway, the second straight race that he ran, and he did finish in a very respectful 4th place and ran a very strong and really, really good race and came up short of picking up his first NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series win. Now, after the race had concluded, someone asked him, "Are you hoping to fill the gaps on your schedule for 2025? And he said yes, he is hoping that he can fill the gaps on the schedule that remain of race that he does not have confirmed for 2025. Bayley Currey, of course, going into this year, does not have a full-time ride. Christian Rose was supposed to drive this truck full-time in 2025, but funding issues had come up, even though Christian Rose is still expected to make starts in this truck before the end of the year and season. Bayley Currey is way too good right now to be racing not full-time right now. I know last year was not a great season for Bayley Currey, but I think of all drivers in this series, he deserves to be full-time. He's way too good. He should not be racing part-time currently at the moment, and he's proven that. He had a chance to win Daytona, and he gets in the truck this weekend and runs very well and very respectful. Put together a really strong run. I really hope he can find the funding and sponsorship to be full-time throughout the year, because I think he has a chance and opportunity to make the playoffs this year. The Nice Motorsports trucks do look like they're showing really good pace and speed currently at the moment right now, so I really hope they can find the funding and sponsorship, because personally, I think Bayley Currey should be a full-time driver. We'll have to wait and see if he does end up going full-time before the end of the year, but right now he's not full-time at this moment. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Now, Bubba Wallace, before the NASCAR Cup Series race took place this weekend, he was speaking to media in regards to working with Charles Deneke in 2025 and spoke about the fact he does have job security throughout the 2025 season. And Bubba Wallace is speaking about that, and he says that he has grown a lot more confident, and he's also relieved that he's not worried about his job at 23XI Racing going into the year, and he feels a lot more relieved not being on social media, and he's grown a lot more confidence going into 2025. I like this new Bubba Wallace. He has looked really strong to start off 2025 and has shown a lot of really good pace and really strong speed to start off this season. He, of course, won his duel last Thursday and also had really strong speed in the 500 before getting caught up in a wrecking incident. And then, of course, he did very, very well in the Cup Series race earlier today, finishing in 9th and was one of the fastest Toyotas in the field. I think Bubba Wallace has a lot of confidence right now, and that's a really good thing for Bubba because that's one thing that he's kind of lacked over the years as a driver is he's lacked that confidence. And I think having that confidence right now is something that he really needs if he's going to want to be successful long-term in the sport. I think this relationship between Charles Deneke and, of course, you look at Bubba, I think they're going to be really strong this year. They're looking for success. They're looking for that consistency. I think there's a really good chance and opportunity that consistency is going to continue. And I think it was really great to see that Bubba and him are working very, very well. And I think it's going to be fun to see what these two can do throughout the remainder of the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Frankie Muniz. Now, Frankie Muniz, of course, is running full-time in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2025, driving number 33 truck for the Raymond Brothers Racing. And Frankie Muniz, after getting crashed out with around 30 laps to go, getting involved in an incident with Connor Mosag, he spoke to the media after the race, and he felt after the race that he did not get the respect that he deserves, and he doesn't feel like he does not get the respect on the racetrack that he feels like he deserved. He feels like it was not respected in ARCA when he drove for Rhett Jones Racing full time, and he feels like the drivers don't race him with respect on the racetrack. Now, in defense of Frankie Muniz, I don't blame him for being a little bit frustrated about the lack of respect on the track, but I do think that is unfortunately the nature of the beast of the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series currently at the moment right now. The Truck Series has a lot of young drivers, and while we talked about the fact there hasn't been a lot of crashes and a lot of overtime finishes, the drivers do have an issue sometimes when it comes to etiquette and respect. And I think in regards to respect for Frankie, respect is earned. You're not expecting to get respect. You should not be expecting ultimately, considering, I know, Frankie, you're an actor, but you should not ultimately be expecting to get respect right from the get-go. If you're expecting to get respect, then you're getting a little bit of handouts to me. I think for Frankie Muniz's sake, I think the focus is to be heads down. He's looked really good to start the year. Of course, got a top 10 at Daytona. And then, of course, he was running inside a top 10, top 15, a majority event at Atlanta Motor Speedway. At this point for Frankie, the most important thing is to keep his head down and focus toward the future right now. Because if he can do that, I think he'll be in a really good position for the remainder of the year. I don't think that Frankie will make the playoffs this year or anything like that. But I think one way to get respect on the racetrack, you basically just perform really good, and I think people will ultimately respect your team and the Raymond Brother Racing organization. I think he does have a good chance, though, to do really good with this team. We'll see what he can do the remainder of the year, and we'll see if he can continue to be really strong with this team in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Preece. Now, after the Daytona 500 crash that had taken place after the race or near the end of the event, Ryan Preece, of course, basically got involved in another flip that, of course, he was involved in another flip in 2023 where he had a really scary wreck in the grass. Then, of course, during this year's Daytona 500, Ryan Preece got caught up in another crash, another incident, started by Christopher Bell, who, of course, won Atlanta earlier this weekend, crashing into the outside wall, and Ryan Preece basically did a wheelie and then flipped upside down. Now, Ryan Preece was super critical after the race had concluded at the Daytona 500, and many people in the industry were really speculating on what Ryan Preece is going to say to the media this past weekend. Well, Ryan Preece did speak to the media, and he actually said he felt fine after the wreck had concluded. He had gotten into his motorhome and drove away from Florida and was focusing on trying to win this weekend at Atlanta, which ultimately he did not go to victory lane this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Ryan Preece, obviously, this is going to be an interesting season for him, but he also kind of talked a little bit about some of the thoughts and the criticisms he had towards super speedway racing, which we are going to talk about here in just a short little bit. But Ryan Preece really doesn't know what to do about the cars flipping upside down, which I think we know at this point that the underbody is a major issue, right, with the next-gen car. And I think if they could find a way to fix some of the underbody issues that this car has, I think that we could be in a really good position and in a golden position going forward. But I think the good news is that Ryan Preece is okay. Wrecks like that are no joke. They're very serious, and the sooner you can figure out a way to stop these cars flipping upside down, the better it's going to be for everybody, in my opinion. So I hope NASCAR can resolve the issue of the cars flipping upside down. I get aerodynamics and physics are always a thing, but I think the most important thing is trying to find a way to have less of this being a consistent thing. If we can find a way to stop having as many wrecks, as many flips, as much carnage as we've been seeing in the next-gen era, the better I think it's going to be for everybody. We'll see if NASCAR tries to figure out a solution toward this. They did not take the car back to the R&D Center, which is really interesting, but the most important thing is that Ryan Preece was okay after the crash, and I think that's the most important thing, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Briscoe. Now, Chase Briscoe spoke to the media this past weekend on Saturday before cars got on track and spoke about the penalty that he received and the fact that they are going to appeal and potential setback that they are going to have at the start of the season. And he basically said he got a call while he was feeding his dog Cooper, and Brad Moran said basically that 20 minutes after the call had happened, he was going to be handed a pretty big penalty. Now, Chase Briscoe, of course, got handed a 100 points driver and owner point penalty. James Small, of course, had been suspended for 4 races pending appeal. And then, of course, he got hit with a $100,000 fine for issues in the spoiler modification area, which, of course, you're not supposed to basically modify any sort of the next-gen parts because NASCAR feels like you're going to get a competitive advantage. For Chase Briscoe, it's disappointing because right now he is currently at negative 51 points. Now, if he is able to win the appeal, which we don't know when the appeal is going to take place, NASCAR will make the decision on that. If Chase Briscoe is to win the appeal, he would basically go right back into the playoffs, but he right now is out of the playoffs and is 98 points below the cutoff line currently at the moment. But the good news for him, he actually gained a couple points today, and I do think even with the penalty, he still has a chance and opportunity to turn the season around. I do feel bad for Briscoe, though, because I do think that Chase Briscoe is someone that I think we're all looking at that could have a really strong season in the NASCAR Cup Series this year, and I think it's going to be fun to see what he can do with this program throughout the remainder of the season. But this penalty is definitely really unfortunate for Chase Briscoe. I don't think Briscoe is going to win the appeal. It's been very rare that we've seen outside of the Hendrick-Louvergate situation. It's been very rare that a team that's gone to appeal process and has been able to win. So while I think they do have a chance, if they can present the evidence in case, they may have a chance to win. But as of right now, I'm leaning toward them not winning at the moment, and I think it's going to be very unlikely that they're going to win the appeal. In my honest opinion, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to win that overall. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Truck Series race and the race that happened in trucks. So, with around 60 laps to go in the Truck Series race, there was a car that I believe was blowing up. I believe it was Nathan Bird, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a lot of oil that was getting on the racetrack. Now, Roger Krupp, with around 60 laps to go, who was running in second position at the time on the inside, the truck completely basically snapped loose out of nowhere. That caused a big pileup that included his teammate Andres Perez. I believe a couple other trucks got collected in the back of the field, including Daniel Hemrick, and also William Swalch got dumped by Tyler Ankrum coming down the front straightaway. Now, after this, a lot of drivers, including Kyle Busch, were really frustrated, and they were complaining about the track being extremely dirty. Now, NASCAR would throw the red flag, but instead of bringing the trucks down pit road where they probably should have been, they left them on the bottom of the banking, and Speedy Dry got all the way inside of the driver's windows, and drivers were complaining about the kitty litter that was inside the truck, which, of course, is the Speedy Dry. When I saw this incident take place, I was really, really frustrated. I know the broadcast is kind of laughing it off, thinking it's a joke, but this is not a joke. This is incompetence from NASCAR officiating and the work crews over there. I don't know who's managing the Truck Series in regards to the direction right now, but whoever's managing the Truck Series, it might be Eric Peterson, I'm not entirely sure. Whoever's doing it, they need to basically get things fixed over there because this is something that should not be happening. There is no reason why these trucks should not have been on pit road when they were cleaning the track. Because stuff like that, there could have been damage, there could have been issues with the engine that came into effect, and I feel like something like this is inexcusable and uncalled for on NASCAR's end, and something that was absolutely just really unnecessary that did not need to happen. And NASCAR's had this many, many times where they have these problems and they don't really figure out solutions. I really hope they clean stuff like this up soon in regards to fishing, because right now some of the stuff they're doing is just stupid, it's unnecessary, and stuff like this is just uncalled for. You can't have trucks on the bottom of the track and then basically get kitty litter all over them. It's stupid, it's pointless, and something that does need to be cleaned up going forward. Will NASCAR do that? I don't know, to be honest with you, but some of the people doing the track cleanup need to be brought back that were let go in recent months, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Cindric and Kyle Larson. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway, you saw the late race incident between Austin Cindric and Kyle Larson with 3 laps to go. So Kyle Larson had gotten a really good push from William Byron and got a great run going into turn number 1. And Kyle Larson was told by his spotter Tyler Mon, "You are clear." But Kyle Larson kept going up the racetrack. His spotter Tyler Mon said on the radio, "You're not clear. You're not clear. You're not clear." And then Kyle Larson still came up the racetrack, and this would put Austin Cindric in the outside wall. William Byron drifted up the track, got really aero tight, would get loose, and would run to the inside of Austin Cindric, spinning Austin Cindric hard into the inside wall, and William Byron's night, unfortunately, would basically come to an end as well. Kyle Larson would take some accountability for the crash in the incident, while Austin Cindric, well, he wasn't completely mad, but he was really frustrated and really disappointing with the incident and situation. When I look at this crash and incident, there is clear cut that Kyle Larson was at fault. And I did see some Kyle Larson fans that were defending Kyle Larson for the incident, but I think it's pretty clear as day that Kyle Larson was at fault for the incident and the crash. He was being told by a spotter, "You're not clear. You're not clear. You're not clear." If your spotter's telling you 2 or 3 times, you probably should back off. That's the one thing about Kyle Larson that I've always had a problem with as a Larson fan is, yes, Kyle Larson is a fantastic race car driver, but sometimes he can go a little bit overboard, and he causes these incidents on the racetrack that are completely unnecessary. Is it the worst thing that Kyle Larson's done? No. There's a certain incident that I can think of, and there's been other incidents that he's done on the track that have been way worse. But I think in this case, in this situation, Larson needs to learn that you can't just go up the track and try to clear yourself, because you're going to end up getting yourself wrecked, and he nearly got himself wrecked, and he's very lucky he didn't get himself wrecked in this situation. So I think that Larson's very lucky that there wasn't a wreck that he got involved in there. It could have been way worse. It could have been more serious. Luckily, no one got hurt in that situation, but Larson definitely was way too overaggressive, and it's clear as day that Kyle Larson was at fault for the wreck. People could say he wasn't at fault, but it's definitely clear as day that Kyle Larson was definitely the main man at fault for the big wreck to happen with 3 laps to go. In my honest opinion, I think he definitely should take responsibility, which he did take responsibility for that crash. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Daytona 500 and super speedway racing in general. So there's been obviously a lot of talk and a lot of conversation in regards to the Daytona 500 and legitimacy of the Daytona 500 as well. Now, William Byron obviously defended his Daytona 500 win after, of course, he picked up a second straight Daytona 500 win, which some people were obviously very critical of William Byron picking up the win. But if you were to ask me, William Byron should be defending his win. Look, he just picked up a second Daytona 500 win. There's definitely some luck that has to be played into that for sure. But Christopher Bell had a different approach to this. He basically called out the lack of super speedway racing and basically said how bad the super speedway racing has been at Daytona International Speedway, and also did say as well that basically there needs to be major changes to super speedway racing in the next-gen cars. Alex Bowman kind of criticized it. Denny Hamlin's been very critical of it, but I think Christopher Bell was definitely, without question, the most critical of it. Funny enough, he did end up winning the Cup Series race later tonight. But I think Bell's absolutely right. And I think some of the drivers spoke about the legitimacy of the Daytona 500 are absolutely right for sure. I do think the legitimacy of the Daytona 500, while it still is the biggest event every single year, the legitimacy of the Daytona 500 has been going out closer on a year-by-year basis. There's not been a lot of those major and big moments in recent years that have taken place that have made this race as big of an event that I think it should be. And I think that's really, really unfortunate because the Daytona 500 should be the biggest event that is happening in NASCAR. And it feels like that the event is losing a lot of that prestige and a lot of that enjoyment that everybody is really looking forward to, which I think is disappointing in a sense. But it's also not shocking and surprising, as I think, like I've said, the event has lost some of that prestige that I think a lot of fans are really, really looking forward to. I think what we saw in Atlanta today, which we're going to talk about the racing in Atlanta in just a short little bit, I do think that the racing can improve at these types of tracks. We need to take the drag out of these cars at these types of tracks, except at Atlanta, and I think we need to take the drag. So I think that's one thing that's causing a lot of the fuel saving, because a lot of times it's fuel saving which is causing these packs to be big, and it's causing the packs to not separate, which I think you want that separation for the best racing, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey LaJoie. Now, Corey LaJoie did compete in his second of 8 scheduled starts with Briscoe Racing in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025 this year. Unfortunately, got taken out of a crash at the end of the event. But before the racing even began, Corey LaJoie did speak to Bob Pockers and many people in the industry, and he's hoping that with a lot of the new sponsorship coming into Briscoe Racing, he is hoping that he can make more NASCAR Cup Series starts with Briscoe Racing in 2025. Now, Corey LaJoie did have a very strong run in the Daytona 500. Atlanta did not go as well for him, but he did have a really strong run in the Daytona 500. And honestly, I'd like to see Corey LaJoie have a chance and opportunity to make more starts with Briscoe Racing this year. Obviously, the 01 car is not scheduled to run the whole entire year. That, of course, is the rebranded number 15 car, which we will likely see in more starts at some point this year with other drivers behind the wheel. But I do think that Corey LaJoie, as much as people were critical of him and some of the stuff he did and the way he kind of got his way into that 01 car, the Kids College Fund thing, I'm not a big fan of that. But I think that Corey LaJoie is a solid driver. He's not an amazing driver by any stretch of imagination, but I think he's good enough that he's earned an opportunity to make more starts with the team. The question will be, will Rick Ware give him all the starts, or will another team give him a chance and opportunity like an NY Racing down the road, or maybe we see BJ McLeod give him a start in a super speedway that he's not scheduled with at this point. We don't know for sure. At this point, more likely, it's just super speed races, but maybe some intermediates is what he's going to have on the schedule because he will not be running this weekend at COTA. We don't know for sure if the 15 or the 01 will show up this weekend. Maybe we get Joey Ham behind it. Will that be really, really cool? But I think for Corey LaJoie, it'd be nice to see him get more chances and opportunities to be in a good ride. But Corey LaJoie is probably never going to get that ride. Last year was just a really frustrating year, and he just didn't really show anything last year, which is why he was not full-time in the sport this year, even though he did bring sponsorship and funding to the ride this season. So overall, certainly interesting for sure. And I do think in regards to Corey LaJoie, we'll have to see if he does get the chance and opportunity to make more starts with the Rick Ware group. We'll have to wait and see if that does end up happening in 2025 going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, Kyle Busch, we got a couple stories surrounding him. But the first one revolves around his frustration in regards to Carson Hocevar and many of the drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series with Carson Hocevar. So after Stage 1 had concluded in the race, you could hear some radio chatter that was going on Max, which many people were able to see this, and they surfaced. And Kyle Busch had one of his old school KFB rants that he used to have back in the day. He was really pissed off with Carson Hocevar on the radio. He basically told his crew chief and his spotter saying, you better tell the number 77, which of course is Carson Hocevar, that if he does do that again, I'm going to wreck him. I don't care if I wreck the field, I will end up wrecking him. He was not the only driver, though, that was really frustrated with Carson Hocevar in the race. Ryan Blaney was really frustrated about getting wrecked. Ross Chastain, after the race concluded, spoke to him after the race had happened. Other drivers in the field on the radio came over and chatted with him. Ryan Blaney among them basically praised Carson for the talent that he brings in, but he basically told him you need to calm down, you need to start making your moves a little bit less crazy than you've been making on the track. I 100% agree with a lot of drivers, including Kyle Busch, and Kyle Busch did have more of an analytical approach after the race had concluded, considering that might be where he might be headed in 2026 with the silly season stuff. Look, Carson Hocevar is an extremely talented driver. There's no denying that. There's no question about that. But Carson Hocevar sometimes drives way in over his head. And I do like the mentality that he basically said he wants to be here and compete. And I think we all know that Carson Hocevar wants to come in and compete as a driver in the sport. And he wants to have success. The problem is he's been a little bit over-aggressive in some areas on the track, and I think it's causing some drivers to not want to race against him. And I think that's unfortunate for him, but at the same time, I think we all have to sit here and say, Carson, clean up some of the antics on the track, and you won't get wrecked on the track. That's just plain and simple. And I think if Carson could clean up some of the driving antics on the track and just race with a lot more respect out there, I think more people in the industry would definitely be very happy to work with him. The problem is sometimes he drives way in over his head, and it's causing a lot of crashes that are unnecessary, that don't need to happen, and I think that hopefully he can clean it up down the road. He's way too good making some of the mistakes he's making on the track. I hope he can clean it up because he shook Ross Chastain's hand, and I think that if the people from Chevrolet can calm him down a little bit, because I think Carson does have so much potential to be really good in the sport, I think then he can have a lot of success. So we'll see what happens down the road for Carson, but I think he needs to clean up some of the driving antics. Otherwise, he may not have a ride in the future in the Cup Series because some of the drivers are not going to put up with that, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Atlanta Motor Speedway. Now, before the NASCAR Cup Series cars got on track this weekend, many drivers spoke about the racing at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and you could tell the track was starting to wear. Chase Elliott speaking the front stretch on Saturday, and basically many reporters in the industry as well. Chase Elliott actually praised the wearing at Atlanta Motor Speedway because he loves the racing that's been taking place there and loved the fact that Atlanta is starting to wear out and eventually could lead to higher horsepower racing. And I have to agree with Chase Elliott on this too. The racing Atlanta Motor Speedway, at least on the NASCAR Cup Series side, I got to say was absolutely amazing and very, very good. Guys are making very impressive moves. I know the end of the race was not that good, especially with the bad officiating call that, trust me, we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. But I think the racing itself at Atlanta was really awesome today for the Cup Series. You had guys making really aggressive moves. Up to the inside, up to the outside. Pensacars making moves. Bubba Wallace is making moves. Cindric was making moves. You had guys like Noah Gragson up front early making moves. Shane Van Gisbergen, Ross Chastain, Carson Hocevar making aggressive moves. Alex Bowman too. And I think that's one thing about Atlanta compared to Daytona is that the racing at these tracks, those tracks have been as good in the next gen era. But I think the racing at Atlanta in the next gen era has been up there for some of the best. I still think Kansas and Homestead are probably, and Charlotte too, are probably still the best tracks when it comes to next gen racing, but Atlanta's up there definitely for sure, and it's growing on me for sure. When they originally had this configuration of track, I was super skeptical of it, but now I'm a massive fan of it, and the racing just has been phenomenal and absolutely incredible. So I love Atlanta Motor Speedway. I love the racing for super speedways, and I think it's been epic. I think it's been fun to watch definitely for sure, and I love the fact that we're seeing some really awesome and really fun racing at Atlanta. It's really fun to watch, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch once again. Now, during NASCAR Cup Series qualifying for the Better Health 400, it was reported by Steven Taranto from CBS that Kyle Busch was actually talking to Chad Knaus, and they were chuckling up during NASCAR Cup Series qualifying at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Now, that is very interesting considering the fact that Kyle Busch and Chad Knaus used to work together when Kyle Busch was over at Hendrick Motorsports from 2000 as a development driver back in 2003 all the way up till after he left in 2007. Now, obviously, this does not fully mean anything about Kyle Busch going over to Hendrick Motorsports or anything like that in 2026, considering the fact that Kyle Busch, we already know, is a free agent currently at the moment at the end of this year. But what could this mean down the road? So this could mean that just Kyle Busch is talking. Obviously, of course, Spire Motorsports, they have a much more closer technical alliance to Hendrick Motorsports in 2025, which, of course, does affect their Truck Series program as well, along with the fact they're likely to run a part-time Cup entry in 2025 as well. But I think about the possibilities for Kyle Busch in the silly season side of things. And we already know, like I've already said, that it's very likely Kyle Busch will not be back at Richard Childress Racing in 2026. One team that we have heard is a potential possibility if Kyle Busch doesn't go back to RCR next year is Spire Motorsports. Spire Motorsports, Kyle Busch is working very closely with currently at the moment right now in the Truck Series. He just picked up a win for them this past weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway in a great photo finish. And you see all the Hendrick logos on there. If Kyle Busch was to go over to a much stronger Spire Motorsports team, I think he would have a chance and an opportunity to be very, very competitive. Now, there's other teams Kyle Busch could go to. Trackhouse Racing is one of them, and maybe be like a stopgap driver for Connor Zillich, who may not be ready next year, but I think it's very likely he'll be ready in 2026. Some bring up Joe Gibbs Racing, some bring up 2311, but I think Spire is a one that you got to really look at, and we don't know how long Michael McDowell's contract is, because Carson Hocevar is not going anywhere next year once he goes to Hendrick Motorsports, replaces Alex Bowman, or I don't think Justin Neely's going anywhere either, even though Justin Neely's under Hendrick development contract as well. So I think that when you look at this, if there's anybody that's going to get replaced over at Spire, it's Michael McDowell, but I don't think Michael McDowell should also be replaced at this point. So I think that this is going to be a story we're going to be following as time progresses and goes on in regards to Kyle Busch, whether he does go to Spire. But I think the fact that he's talking to him tells me there's definitely a chance and opportunity that this could be a possibility. We'll see if something turns around in this, and this is just talking at this point, but I do think there's a chance that something like this could align toward the not-so-distant future of Kyle going to Spire. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about officiating once again. So last night, during the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, NASCAR actually let them race back to the checker flag, and we saw Austin Hill, who wasn't going to get passed by Eric Almirola or Justin Allgaier anyways at the end of the race. They let them race back to the checker flag. Despite the fact there was a pretty massive crash that was taking place down the back straightaway, Parker Retzlaff, I believe Sheldon Creed, I think Jesse Love were involved in the big wreck, and about 10 cars got involved in the big wreck. But NASCAR let them race back to the checker flag. So we're all thinking, okay, they're going to be consistent and let this happen throughout the rest of the weekend. Well, during the drivers' meeting earlier today before the Cup Series race took place, NASCAR said that they should have thrown the caution at the end of the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, once again being inconsistent. And then again, we saw that inconsistency show during the Cup Series race at Atlanta. Coming to the checker flag, we're setting up for a fantastic three-wide finish between Christopher Bell, Carson Hocevar, and Kyle Larson. We're all thinking they're going to let him race back to the line. Nope. Turns out they don't let him race back to the line. They throw the caution about 1,000 feet away from the start-finish line. Christopher Bell ends up winning the race, causing another controversy. Now, it was a 4-car wreck that took place on the backstretch, about a 10-car wreck actually, between Shane Van Gisbergen and Josh Berry, Tyler Reddick, and a couple other guys in the back of the field. Now, objectively, I don't think it's the end of the world that NASCAR threw the caution, even though personally, I think they should have let him race back to the checker flag. But if we want to throw the caution, fine. The problem that a lot of people like myself are having is that NASCAR is being way too inconsistent. That is a big issue right now. They've had major issues with inconsistency, and we're only 2 weeks into the year. During Daytona 500 qualifying for the duels, they were 10 feet away from the checker flag, it seemed like, and NASCAR threw the caution despite the fact that Erik Jones probably should have gotten the victory. They threw the caution, Cindric won the race. Then during the Xfinity and the truck races, they throw the caution. Okay, fair enough. They're being consistent there. Then during the Daytona 500, they throw all that out the window. There's a big wreck happens on the back straightaway. Austin Cindric, Denny Hamlin, Cole Custer, and everyone except William Byron, Tyler Reddick, and Jimmy Johnson all get through the wreck. They basically don't let it throw the caution. Then during the Xfinity race, they do the same thing. We need to be very consistent. That's one of my biggest problems. Was it worthy of a caution tonight? I guess you could say that for sure. But the problem for me, and I think most fans, is the inconsistency. We have had major issues and major problems with NASCAR being consistent for the longest time. And the fan base is getting tired of the inconsistency. Just make up your damn mind, NASCAR. Make up the mind and say, hey, are we going to throw the caution here and keep it like that? Or are we not going to throw the caution? Make up your mind. Because that's what they should be doing right now. If they make up their mind, that's the best thing they could do. The problem is NASCAR's been way too inconsistent. And they've had issues with officiating. And they shouldn't be having this. This is like a race thing at this point. This isn't even a weekly thing at this point. This is becoming a problem every other race, it seems like. Because we've had officiating problems in the majority of races in 2025. Whether it's the issues with the tires and the Ty Dillon stuff that happened today. We need to get this figured out quickly. Because otherwise fans are going to turn away really quickly from watching the sport. And I don't think NASCAR wants that right now. So NASCAR, get your officiating together very quickly. Otherwise, because it's learning legitimacy of sport and hurt what was a fantastic race today. Because the race today was absolutely incredible and no one could take away from that. But the officiating is a big problem and it needs to be figured out going forward into the not so distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Corey Heim. As it was confirmed early this afternoon that Corey Heim has officially signed a development contract and has become the first development driver for 23XI Racing in 2025. He will drive the number 67 car in select races in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025, and he will also drive the number 24 car for Sam Hunt Racing in quite a few races in the 2025 season. His first scheduled NASCAR Cup Series start will be at the Spring Kansas race in May, and Booty Barker is going to be the crew chief of that car. For the number 24 car, his first start will be this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. We don't know who the crew chief is currently at the moment, but I have to think it's the crew chief. The number 24 car might be Alan Hart, but I'm not entirely sure at this point. Corey Heim, this is something that's been kind of rumored. There's been a lot of speculation that Corey Heim was going to make select starts in the NASCAR Cup Series for 23XI Racing this year, and now it's officially known and confirmed. Let's start by talking about Corey Heim. This is a really good move on 2011 Racing's part. Corey Heim is the youngest driver in Truck Series history to reach 12 wins in the series, as of course Corey Heim just turned 22 earlier at the end of last year in October, and he's the youngest driver to reach 10 wins in Truck Series competition. He's also been the fastest truck consistently over the course of the last couple of years. Yes, Christian Eckes is more consistent, but we saw a lot of speed out of Corey Heim, and he won 6 races in 2024, and he's off to a really strong start by winning the first race of the Truck Series season in 2025. He's someone that probably should be full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series currently at the moment, but the reason he's not full-time with 2311 instead of Riley Herbst is because Riley Herbst, of course, brings sponsorship and funding for the number 35 car with the Monster Energy funding. But I think that maybe Riley Herbst might be a stopgap driver for him currently at the moment. I think Corey Heim should be full-time, and it's good to see he's going to get an opportunity to work under a development deal with 2311 and Denny Hamlin as well. But I think the big news here that's probably not being talked about too much is the fact that 2311 Racing is going to be throwing their support at Sam Hunt Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Sam Hunt Racing is one of the top Toyota teams in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but they're not a team that's always up there competing for wins on a week-by-week basis. They've shown really good speed, but I think that him going over to Sam Hunt Racing, making a lot of starts with 2311 Racing support, is absolutely huge. Sam Hunt Racing is a team, and they were rumored at one point to have a car for the Daytona 500 for Martin Truex Jr. That was rumored that was going around. I think that Sam Hunt Racing is a team that down the road has potential to move up to NASCAR Cup competition. They've had aspirations, from what I understand, in recent years, so I could see that being certainly a possibility. But going as Cup Series starts, I talked about this on the channel earlier today. Booty Barker being the crew chief. That is absolutely huge. Booty Barker, in my opinion, is a solid crew chief. And I think working with a young driver like Corey Heim, I think these two could really gel together. You got Booty Barker, who had been the crew chief for Bubba Wallace for about 3 or 4 seasons prior to this year. Obviously, no longer the crew chief right now at the moment for them, but still working over at 2311 Racing. I think that this is a no-brainer pairing, and I think that Corey and Booty are going to work together. Now, I'm not expecting that we're going to see Corey Heim compete for wins with 2311 Racing. Same thing goes for Sam Hunt Racing, but I do think that Corey Heim will have a very solid, and I think will show some really strong pace and really good speed with 2311 Racing in 2025. Now, let's say Corey Heim does really, really well this year. What could this mean for Corey Heim's future in 2026? I think if you're Riley Herbst, and I know Riley's bringing funding and sponsorship to the table, if you're Riley Herbst, you really need to step up to the plate and step up your A game, because you got to start performing really, really good, because you could lose your seat at the end of the year if you do not perform. I know that Riley's a good driver, but let's be real and honest, Corey Heim should probably be in that seat. Some are going to say Bubba Wallace, but Bubba Wallace just signed a multi-year contract extension. I know contracts can easily be broken, but Bubba Wallace does not deserve to lose a seat over 2311, so I think he'll be safe, and Tyler Reddick isn't going anywhere anytime soon. What about Tricon forming a Truck Series team, or Cup team? We know they're going to make more starts this year in Cup. Why not give them an opportunity to be a full-time team and go after a charter along with a team like Junior Motorsports? That could certainly be interesting for sure. But I think about Corey Heim, right? I think he's going to be competitive. I think he's earned this right and has earned this opportunity. And I really think that Corey Heim is going to be very much a driver to watch out for this year in Cup Series starts. I think it's going to be fun to see what he can do. I don't know about the future of the other drivers who could drive this car, because I certainly think the 6-7 may make more starts than what's scheduled currently at the moment. Maybe for someone like a Carl Edwards or Kurt Busch, because we thought Kurt Busch might get an opportunity to drive this car. Kurt, of course, has been medically cleared to return to NASCAR Cup competition, so I could certainly see Kurt Busch getting an opportunity to get behind the wheel. But realistically, I think it's just Corey Heim right now. I don't see Carl Edwards doing it. I don't see Eric Almirola doing it. Maybe Taylor Gray or William Swalsh. That could be a possibility down the road. But right now, I think the big and main focus at the moment is on Corey Heim. And I think it's going to be cool to see what Corey Heim can do in his Select NASCAR Cup and Xfinity Series starts with those respective teams in the 2025 NASCAR season. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we are talking about Dodge. Now, we have talked a lot about Dodge on the channel in recent weeks, going back to last week during Daytona 500 week, as it was originally reported by Chris Stiper of CatchFence.com on course on Friday evening or Sunday morning before the Daytona 500 had happened, that Dodge was eyeing a return to NASCAR competition in the Craftsman Truck Series in 2026 with a potential Cup Series program as early as 2028. Well, we got a pretty big update and a pretty big bombshell from Jordan Bianchi last night after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race had concluded at Atlanta Motor Speedway. According to Jordan Bianchi, Dodge, as expected, is eyeing a return to NASCAR as early as next year in the Craftsman Truck Series in 2026. They would have to be approved by the end of this year to join the Truck Series, and it really could happen as the Truck Series is expected to streamline a lot of things going into the 2026 season. But they're expected to have a Truck Series competition, some Truck Series teams switch over there in 2026. But wait, there is more to this. According to Jordan Bianchi, it's not stopping there in the Truck Series, as it sounds like Dodge could have a Cup Series program as early as 2027. It's possible they may wait till 2028 to join up in the NASCAR Cup Series, but there's a very good chance that Dodge will have a Cup Series program as early as 2027. This is absolutely a massive deal in regards to manufacturers. We have talked about this on the channel. We hear Steve Phelps say it all the time. Are we getting a new manufacturer? He keeps saying there's no BS this time. We're getting a manufacturer, working on getting a new manufacturer, and no one believes him. And now it's officially confirmed that Dodge is likely coming back in 2026. And when you have someone like Jordan Bianchi, who's one of the most credible reporters in the industry, saying that this is likely going to happen, I definitely believe it. The first question we have to ask is what teams could switch over from the Truck Series over to the Dodge? Well, one team everyone's going to think about is ThorSport Racing. From what I understand, ThorSport Racing is in their final year of their contract with Ford right now. They signed a 3-year deal when they announced Hailie Deegan would be part of the team in 2023 when she joined over there. They're in their last year, and plus Ty Majeski, Matt Kraft, and Jake Garcia and Ben Rhodes are not under contract with Ford. They're not part of Ford's development deal at all. So I would think that ThorSport is the most likely team from the truck side to switch. And I think Nice is another team you got to watch out for. Nice Motorsports, they're not the number one Chevy team at the moment, so I could definitely see that. The reason I mentioned ThorSport too is because Front Row, they're the number one Ford team currently at the moment. I think Nice is the one other team I look at from the truck side that could switch over. And there might be some other teams down the road that might do it. Now let's talk about the Cup Series, because the big thing to come out of this is the fact they're likely going to have a Cup program in the next couple of years. What teams on the Cup side could switch over? There's a couple no-brainers to me. First one, Trackhouse Racing. Trackhouse Racing is a team that's been innovative, and they've made some big moves in recent years. And I think Trackhouse Racing is the most likely team to switch. They're not the number one Chevy team right now. They've obviously had some beef because of Ross having beef with Rick Hendrick. And I think that Dodge, with all the stuff they're doing, Trackhouse, I should say, with everything you're doing going global, I think it would make a lot of sense. I do think Connor Zilisch is a Chevy development driver, but they could easily break that contract because he's part of the Red Bull family at this point. And I think that Trackhouse would be in a very similar position to what Joe Gibbs Racing was back in 2007 when they were the second best Chevy team, and of course they switched over to Toyota, and they became the number one most successful team with that brand. So I think that Trackhouse is the most likely. The other teams I look at are Colleague Racing and RFK. Colleague Racing, they're not a good team right now. They're really struggling. They need a massive spark. They need something to go right for that program. I think switching over to Dodge would be the way to go for them, and I think it could really help their team really get up to the next level. RFK, because of Brad's previous relationship, could certainly be a possibility, and Legacy is another team, too, that I really look at as a potential possibility to switch as well. The other big thing that could come out of this, though, is the fact that more entries could be in the field. And considering the fact it's not just Dodge that's rumored, but Honda's also rumored currently at the moment. You heard me right on that. There's a lot of talk that Honda, with them likely leaving IndyCar at the end of this year, it is very likely that Honda could not only be joining back in NASCAR, but also Dodge could be going as well. Because we've heard rumors about Honda potentially coming in. There's been talk about charter extensions. We obviously know there's been some stuff around the lawsuit going on currently at the moment. But NASCAR said if a new manufacturer come in, NASCAR would increase the fields. And I think they were testing that with the OEP, with the Elio Castroneves stuff. I think it's very likely at this point that you are going to see Dodge come back in, at least for sure, in Truck Series competition. And I think it's very likely they'll have a Cup Series program in 2027. And you never know, we could get a new team that joins up. Sometimes you get a new team that comes in when you have a new manufacturer that's making a big move into the series. But I think this is a massive deal for Dodge, right? Because like I said, Dodge has not been in the sport in a long time. They stopped being in the Truck Series back in 2016, and they stopped being in Cup over a decade ago at this point and stopped being Xfinity in some way, shape, or form about 10 years ago at this point. So I think it'd be really cool for Dodge to come back, and I think it's very likely that it will happen in the next couple months that it's going to get announced. I predict that in the next couple of weeks, probably sometime in like March, April, May, more information is going to come out, and I think it's really exciting that Dodge is likely coming back to the series in 2026 and have a Cup program as well, most likely in 2027. So I'm excited about this news for sure, and it's pretty good to see that Dodge is expected to make a comeback in 2026. Really exciting stuff. So, that is going to be today's Long NASCAR News and Motorsports News episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Notifications on so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about Dodge likely coming back to NASCAR next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the stories talked about today on the channel, including Carson Hocevar and his driving standards, the officiating calls, and also, of course, the big news around Heim. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have the entry list for the Cup Series races circuit of the Americas, the Echo Park, Texas Grand Prix. We're also probably going to have Xfinity race picks dropping really soon. We'll have content coming out, people like Hailie Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Cards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Clayton McFarland, Matt Benedetto, Frankie Muniz, Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, all the good stuff on the channel really soon. Eric Almirola, Chandler Smith, you name it. All the good stuff will be coming out very, very soon on the channel in the coming days and weeks. Same with Junior Motorsports, the lawsuit, and Michael Jordan as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.